Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Cody, roll call, please.
Supervisor Gunning?
Here.
Treasurer Rice?
Here.
Trustee Hauk?
Here.
Trustee Monkey?
Here.
Trustee Lannon?
Here.
Trustee Worley?
Here.
Clerk Cody here?
All right, that moves us to item 4, approval of the agenda. Do we have any modifications to the agenda at this time?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we move up our closed session to come after public comment, after number 7, and have our closed session go at that point, and have everything else then remain the same.
Support.
Motion supports. Discussion.
I'll just say, I think it's important to note that the reason to do that is to lower attorneys' fees.
Correct.
Trying to be fiduciary responsibility. right?
Yes, yes,
And safety concerns.
yeah.
The gentleman has to drive all the way back to Freeland.
Perfect.
So I'm more
Right.
concerned about that than money. All right, so all in favor of the modification to the agenda, moving item number 14 up to number 7, which would be closed session.
It would be after 7,
After public comment.
after public
7.
comment.
Oh, after, okay, so it'd be
Right, so
number
if there's
8.
folks here to
I'm
do
sorry.
public
Yep.
comment, we can do that first, so they don't
Gotcha.
have to wait too.
All right, so it'd be item 8. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And, let's see, we move on to public comment. This is going to be item 7 on your agenda. This is going to be restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. Would anyone like to come forward?
Hello, Brian Morris. I live at 1140 Eastwood Drive. I was just wanted to stand up and say I appreciate you guys following through with what you said and looking at everything completely. So I look forward to hearing the rest of the meeting and the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And would anyone else like to come forward at this time for public comment? Seeing none, we close public comment. And we will need to have a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session. Okay, so I'm going to read this over again, okay? I move that the board meet in closed session under Section 8H of the Open Meetings Act to consider written material from the township attorney that is exempt from disclosure by Section 13(1)G of the Freedom of Information Act.
All right, need a second?
Support.
All right, motion support, discussion. We put this to vote. All in favor of moving to?
Nope.
You have to go
Roll-
A roll call. Okay, excuse me.
Supervisor Gunning?
Yes.
Treasurer Rice?
Yes.
Trustee Hauk?
Yes.
Trustee Monkey?
Yes.
Trustee Lannon?
Yes.
Trustee Worley?
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes?
All right, so at this time, we'd have everyone leave the room, and
Norm.
we'll try to make this as brief as possible.
Taking it or
right, so we're still on item 8. And this is, a discussion on authorizing funds for legal defense. Do we have a motion on the table at all?
Do you want to have a discussion first, or?
When it-
We probably should have a motion on the table first, I would think.
I'll make a motion to approve another $5,000 for legal expenses for item number 8.
I'll support that.
Discussion?
It should be made the way it was. The wording should be the same wording we used before.
Why don't you say the wording, and then we can, as far as, Bill,
What?
she's gonna give the wording,
Okay.
and then
Here.
you can
Okay,
go along with that then.
just,
That the township shall continue funding for legal defenses in case number 18 CV 1334, not to exceed an additional, what, 5,000 you said?
$5,000.
5,000, bring the total up to 25,000?
Correct.
Should this cap be reached, the township board will receive an update for the reconsideration.
But yeah, I'm
Good.
fine with that.
Okay, I accept that.
Discussion?
I would like the manager to reinstate this to the insurance company, or resubmit it. Also,
I guess my only concern would be that we're going to end up having our attorney back again in a really short period of time if we have that number, because we
Yeah.
essentially are only
Yeah, right now,
$2,000
We're 2,000 away
Yeah.
from that
away from that
figure.
number.
yeah.
And
Right,
So,
I think that's
Right
gonna be
now-
needed anyways.
Right.
yeah,
They
yeah,
s-
right now with the check that's currently waiting, it would be almost 23,000. So we would have about 2,000.
so I'm wondering
buffer.
if we wouldn't be more prudent to give a little bit more breathing room on that. But we'd need to,
it's up to you, you made the motion.
so you made the motion. If you wanted to,
Or we can keep
I wasn't sure if you
discussing,
knew what the
so.
total was before you made the motion.
I know what the total was.
Okay, all right.
But I'm gonna stay firm with 5,000 for right now because
We may need to bring it back.
It's
in
good.
Yeah,
We-
we may have to
we don't know when the
anyway.
next case, or we don't know when it's gonna go back to court.
Right.
We don't know what's happening.
We always, I hear what Ben's saying, I hear what you're saying. We always have the option of upping it if we need to. You know, the remainder of this cap is going to be utilized fairly quickly, but we can always have the option to come back and readjust the cap pending what we find out in terms of the insurance and some other information. So my sense is that maybe that would be a prudent way to do it, knowing that we can always change the cap. We know we're going to be going through the insurance, find out about that, and then consolidate and see where we go at that point. So I think that makes sense to me, what you're
Well,
suggesting.
this is just a
Bill.
motion right now. It can
Yeah.
get turned down and then.
Right.
And we can raise that cap without attorney presence.
Correct.
Correct, at any
If
time.
we feel the need.
Right. So if something drastically changes quickly, we can change the cap. If not, in the meantime, we have that extra little buffer there as we're trying to check with the insurance and then go from there. So I would support your motion. I mean, I would,
Oh, I see. What you're saying. Well, no, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass.
All right.
And somebody
Yeah,
else
yeah,
can
yeah,
make
yeah.
We're gonna do
another
it as roll
motion
call.
for more money.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes,
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Milky,
Yes.
Trustee Lannan,
Yes.
Trustee Worley.
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes?
Okay, motion does carry. And we move over to,
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a safe
You
trip.
too.
Thanks.
report.
This would be what, item 9 now. This would be reports and board comments.
Where's-
wasn't planning on item A tonight. So let's move to item B. Planning Commission and ZBA updates.
Good evening. I'd like to start my update by speaking briefly about the extraction, sand and gravel pit to moratorium and extraction ordinance. We have we've evaluated the situation with existing sand and gravel regulations and been working with the Township Attorney's Office to prepare an updated extraction ordinance. And as I think as Mark noted in his report, intent is to bring that before you in March for your consideration. Also with the Township Attorney, we've prepared corresponding amendments to the zoning ordinance that need to go through the hearing process at the Planning Commission level, and that is also intended to be done in March. We have a hearing scheduled for them for March 17th. The zoning ordinance component is really to reference our new extraction ordinance. The regulations would be moving into a separate regulatory ordinance. So that's where that stands. You'll be seeing that next month. Those regulations are currently in the Township Attorney's hands. He's going through the final review and checking all the details to make sure that they're all he's comfortable and ready to recommend moving forward on those. But we will see them shortly and have them for you next month. The Zoning Board of Appeals did not meet in February. They are holding a meeting next week. They do not have any agenda items, any applications. So we're going to be focusing on a training session. And they have some materials in hand, and we'll be talking about various aspects of their responsibilities, and especially because we have some new members that hopefully we'll be able to get some good discussion from that. The Sidewalk Committee also did not meet in February, but will be meeting next week. And we have some details for them. One of the items for them is to look at their 2020 meeting schedule and focus on kind of focus their activities on looking over the horizon. What do we want even beyond the current fiscal year or the next fiscal year, but are there long-term priorities related to sidewalks and pathways that we should be considering in the out years beyond that? So doing some longer-term planning for them. The Planning Commission, they did have some items on their February agenda, one of which will eventually be coming to you, and that was a group daycare home special use permit. They did hold a hearing on it, but the application did not have all the information that needed. The applicant unfortunately could not be there to provide the missing items. They sent a representative, but that person didn't have all the answers. So the item was held over, postponed until their March meeting for a decision and recommendation to you on that aspect of it. We have the other item on their list, home occupation permit. The applicant couldn't be there. Had to be out of town at the last minute, so they asked for the postponement. And then the final item was a text amendment that the applicant withdrew. So they didn't have a lot to show for their meeting, but it was nonetheless a good meeting. The applicant that withdrew the text amendment, this is related to mixed use or multi-use structures. Mm-hmm. They decided to wait and see what's coming in our new ordinance. And that's the next item on the Planning Commission's list. We're expecting to have the updated draft of the proposed zoning ordinance from McKenna Associates next week, around March 3rd or 4th is the deadline that they're aiming to meet, and we'll be putting that in the Planning Commission's hands. We also will be McKenna is going to be preparing a website where that ordinance will be hosted along with an online comment system, so that we'll have a link on our website for that as that gets developed. I wouldn't expect that immediately in early March, but sometime in March the intent is to have that website up and ready. The Planning Commission will be reviewing the proposed ordinance in March and in April, and we'll be looking at, is this ready for a public hearing? Are there any other details that need to be taken care of? But we are aiming for a public hearing later in the spring. And of course, the ordinance is also going to be the subject of our joint meeting in April that you rescheduled. And Chris Duzer from McKenna Associates will be there to make a presentation and to take comments from all the boards and commissions. for that meeting as well. That is all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Rodney? With our EDA meetings, what we always do is we always have, to ensure that we know exactly who's gonna be in attendance and who's not. So there's never a question on quorum, usually, hopefully, right? We have Amy Peak in the AM. She contacts everybody that she hasn't heard back from as far as correspondence and email with that is going to be ensuring their attendance. And I was just questioning whether you had discussed with the ZBA potentially some type of a program like that to ensure that we don't have any issues where, say, meetings that are off-timed, special meetings that aren't their usual start times, that everybody's aware and knows what time the meetings are, and that there's no surprises.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate what the board did in terms of the change related to alternates and providing compensation to the alternates. And I've let the alternates know that they should plan to attend every meeting. So we'll have that aspect as well, that they will be here, and our intent is that this training session will happen, but in the future, we're also going to try to have some kind of mini elements to that where we can. And so we want to have the alternates in the room so that they're getting that aspect, and so that we have a full board at all times. There certainly is an ongoing effort to make sure that we have a full board for Plan Commission, for the Zoning Board of Appeals, for each of the bodies. One thing I will say with regards to special meetings, I've also made it clear that we do not want to, except under the most extraordinary circumstances, hold a special meeting for the Zoning Board of Appeals in particular. They have a schedule, they can meet every month, and there's very few reasons to hold a meeting outside of that framework. So I would not expect to have a similar circumstance to what we had happen in January, but certainly if we need to hold a special meeting, we'll make sure that we have the full crew there.
And have you talked about, because that does work quite well, is everybody has an idea of who's there, who's not?
Yeah,
And an alternate that maybe has like a prior conflict,
Yeah.
doesn't maybe feel necessary that, do I have to cancel it or not?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, we have made it clear that they're expected to attend,
Mhm.
and that is actually one of the items that I have on my list to talk about during our training session, is just the communication and making sure that the folks are letting us know when they have a problem or a conflict.
Okay.
It's going to keep them away.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. With regards to the extraction language that's being worked on, you said that the ordinance would reference that section. I'm assuming you're talking about the existing ordinance until the new one is gone through public vetting process and adoption, so ultimately both would reference that?
Well, that's a great question. What, the zoning ordinance amendment and this extraction ordinance is separate, is intended to be a separate regulatory ordinance. That does not require any planning commission action. It's entirely a board action to approve that. The zoning ordinance follows this other path where it has to go to the planning commission first and then come to you. The intent is that the zoning ordinance amendment will reference the new extraction ordinance. So the requirements that apply to sand and gravel are essentially being pulled out of the zoning ordinance, and they will be all in the separate license extraction ordinance process. The zoning ordinance, the intent is basically to say sand and gravel pits, extraction operations are allowed. They will no longer be a special use. They will be simply a permitted use, subject to the standard that they must comply with the extraction ordinance. Go and get your extraction permit, and you'll be in compliance with the zoning ordinance element as well. That's the intent. So the reference in the zoning ordinance will be to the new extraction ordinance. And both of those parts are going to end up coming to you. You'll see the extraction ordinance first, and then the zoning ordinance will follow just behind it because of the approval process differences.
So that new ordinance, I'm assuming you've seen enough of it, I'm assuming it has, it's not for every zone, right? Or, you have to follow the zoning ordinance, but I'm assuming it's going to be restricted to certain, that use is going to be restricted to certain zoning.
That's in the zoning ordinance right now. It's restricted to the agricultural district, and that will remain in the zoning ordinance. What we're pulling out of the
And that's what I was
zoning ordinance is
asking.
a special use permit requirement,
Okay.
which will move over to the extraction side. Yeah.
Also, you mentioned the text amendment for the multi-use.
That's right.
Can I ask if that was the applicant that was looking at something on Broomfield?
That's correct, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
good.
the-
I
think
remember
it's
when they
called the
came
Denver-
before us and,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, they decided to wait and see. We did talk about what was coming in the new ordinance and some of the options that would be available to them, and they decided to wait for that ordinance to come in.
It's nice to hear. Thank you.
I think we had mentioned too, in I think our prior discussion, when we talked about putting a kind of a freeze on that issue until the ordinance was changed or modernized. Stockpiling was also part of that, I believe, wasn't it? Then we had talked also about not just extraction, but stockpiling. And I was not sure if you were also looking at that ordinance,
So stockpiling,
materials.
just stockpiling on site, just as if essentially storing materials on site?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that will be part of the extraction ordinance. It's all part of any extraction
Okay,
operation.
all right, so that's gonna be part of it then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's all part of the operation essentially.
All right.
Storage and extraction are
Yeah.
together.
okay.
I just wanted to add, throw out to the board to think about and the citizens as well. Kim shared some information in regards to mining and extraction. And it seems that someone is in Lansing is introducing a bill to take that
Yep.
activity out of the local jurisdiction and put it into the state jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's something to look forward to learning the information. Kim, I forget the House bill
Oh, I
or
can
Senate
look.
bill that you offered.
Yeah.
But there's something out there you could
Yes.
Google and find
Mm-hmm.
and get in contact with your state representatives
Yeah, remove the authority of the local governance.
to talk about your interest, if that is your interest, to retain that in the local jurisdiction as opposed to the state jurisdiction.
It's Senate Bill 431. That's the one that has been around a while. It's the one that.
Yes, it is.
The the proponents of it got in some trouble because a study that they were using to justify it turned out to not be accurate, to say the least. So it kind of stalled from that, but it is
Yeah.
definitely still active. There's definitely people that want that bill to move forward. The House bill, I can't recall the number on it. That one would essentially have a top-down set of zoning standards that would apply for every community, that thou shalt adopt these standards and these standards only. That bill has been introduced by Rebecca Warren, I think state.
Rebecca Warren's senator, isn't she?
Yeah, come to think of it, I thought it was, maybe it's not a House bill. Anyway, I know she introduced it. It must be another Senate bill. But she's a senator from the Ann Arbor area. I don't know if that won't go anywhere. I haven't heard anything on movement on that one, but I do know Senate Bill 431 has still been floated around out there, and there's certainly a lot of people that would like to see it move forward. That's one of the reasons, quite frankly, that we've chosen this approach of putting the extraction regulations in a separate regulatory ordinance,
Not in zoning.
taking them out of zoning, both to give us some more clarity as to what rules will apply, but also because most of these bills are attempting to amend the zoning ordinance, the state zoning act.
All right. Any further questions for Rodney? All right.
And just to
Oh,
mention, we did take action and approve a moratorium
mhm.
on any sort of activity
Correct.
here in the township until that language and ordinance is drafted.
All right. Thank you, Rodney, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item C, monthly report from the township manager. We all have that on our agendas, and residents can look that up also. Very detailed list of all the activities that have gone through the staff here and what's coming up in the future.
I have one of those highlighted, Sherry. I know what it was. It was 64 consumers' power bills, I think it said on it. Are a lot of those, yeah, right here, 53 consumers' power invoices. Are a lot of those streetlights?
Yes.
have we ever checked on any solar light, solar powered ones? I know we talked about that before, but
Not so much solar, but we have upgraded a lot
To
of
LED,
items to
yeah.
LEDs.
I didn't know, I thought we were gonna talk, or I know a couple years ago, we talked about maybe checking into, if we could do some kind of solar
Solar.
deal.
Yeah, you brought that up like 2 or 3 times, I think.
Yeah.
Overall, you know those flashers that they have on stop signs? We had some down here. I mean, they were expensive, but I think they were $5,000 from what the road commission said for down here when they were on Baseline and, when they were on Baseline in Lincoln. Now they got moved out, I think, to Isabella and Baseline. I think they got moved out there. But those were like $5,000 for the pair of them. But, they're gonna last forever. And I mean, I don't know how much we're paying on some of these streetlights, but I mean, we looked through those invoices, like I don't know who had them this month, Brian, I think. I mean, you look through those consumers' invoices and it's,
Expensive, yeah.
you see $36,000 bill for a month and you're like, wow.
The township does collect some money on special assessments for lighting, so there is money coming back in from taxpayers.
And some of the electrical is for pumps for water and
Yeah,
sewer
yeah,
too,
right.
which is a
Right,
large part of the bill. more
right, well,
than,
I understand that,
You know,
yeah.
more than streetlights, and
Right.
you can't get away from that.
No, I know. I just didn't know if like some of those streetlights, if we could look into going some solar on those. I mean, I don't know who would do that, probably somebody from Public Works.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Yep, I made a note.
I had one question too, if I may.
Yes, sir.
It talks about the interest, this is on page 2, the first page of the monthly activity report. Talks about the interest earned by all funds. That's quite a jump.
Yeah,
Can you explain why that is?
interest rates are higher than,
Well, interest rates were higher as
Enough
part
to make
of
that
it.
kind of difference?
Plus, I keep adding more funds into CDs and cutting it closer on cash. And last year, we had quite a few CDs that paid either 2.5, 2.6, or 3% interest. So that really helped. But that's also, the interest rates are going back down again, so I don't think we're gonna see that this year.
you just negotiated one for 2%, which is about the best you can get right now on a
Right.
CD, so that was
Yeah.
good, But you're right,
Yeah.
they're gonna plunge, that
Yeah.
figure will go down in 2020.
Yeah, and we just renewed 4 this week at 1.65, and that was the best we could
Yeah,
get. And that's pretty good.
yeah,
right
That's
now.
something.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any further questions on item C? Okay, item D, board member reports. Start down at Tim.
Yeah, I attended a few meetings since we met last. One being the Isabella County Board of Commissioners regular board meeting, which took place February 18th. The primary gist of that meeting was appointments to citizens to various boards. Appointments go as follow. Brian Partee was appointed to the Board of Public Works for a 3-year term. Amy Perschbacher was appointed to the Community Corrections Advisory Board. Laura Gorley was appointed to the Human Rights Committee as the Public Schools representative. The Zoning Board of Appeals appointment was Brett Duffett for a 3-year term. That concludes the appointments. There were a couple of motions to authorize the chair to accept some grant money. And one was for the Central Dispatch to apply for a fiscal year 2019-2020 hazardous material emergency preparedness grant. It's not a large value per se, but it is some money that they've gotten for a number of years. The value's $1,500. A much more significant grant being applied for, the value of nearly $175,000 is to improve the central dispatch 911 operations center, improve the technology. They've been using equipment that they feel virtually has lived its life and need a significant update. Also attended the Council of Governments February 19th meeting. That was a very important meeting, getting information out to the county folks in government to promote and encourage and talk about the census that's coming up, and to encourage to get all citizens of the township counted in the census, in the 2020 census. The value of a person being counted is $1,800 a year times 10 years. So very significant money that could come to the state. It was mentioned that Michigan had the lowest census in the 2010 count. So
We were the only state that lost population.
we believe that there's a significant of people that were not counted, so the push is out there. And it's going to be toward middle to end of March through into July that people will be responding to the census. Also, I attended with most all of the board members our annual meeting with the County Road Commission to talk about the township's interest in budgeting township money to help out the county maintain their road system. And that's all I have.
I'll just make one comment just to support the census. Along the lines of the $1,800 per resident, the other thing that we gain or lose as a state is representation in Congress, and that's also
Right.
important,
Yes.
so. But otherwise, I have nothing else.
Along with that Council of Governments meeting, I was at it with Tim. They were talking, they had our county up on the board, and our township, they had different colors for townships that had like the best reporting and the worst. And our township was the lowest. Like we had, just say, more people that didn't report in our township than any other township. And a lot of it is to do, with apartments and stuff. So we just, like Tim said, we need to get the word out, and I see the sign out here, that's gonna help too. I was sitting there next to Tim, and I just put, like, if there's 250 people, just say in our township, that don't report, over 10 years, that's $4.5 million. So it's important that we get the word out there. Then I went to the road commission meeting, and pretty much everything we talked about at the road commission meeting, we talked about the other night, or a week later when we had our board meeting with them. The only thing that they did when I was at their meeting, I did ask about Isabella Road, which they explained more on the 20th to us. This meeting was on the 13th. I asked which of the two projects that we have they feel will go this year. We found that out. We know that Lincoln and Broomfield isn't going to go because of all the MDOT work. As far as Isabella Road goes, yesterday I made a call to one of the owners. I know her husband, one of the people that we're seeking to get an easement from. Her husband's a contractor. So I called him and talked to him, and I said, what do we need to do along with the road commission in order to get an easement on your property? He said, well, I'm going to tell you what. He said, they see stakes out there, and he said, you and I do this for a living. But my wife and her sister don't understand when they see a stake every 30 feet apart where this road is actually gonna go. He said, could you go out there and paint a line? So I called Pat yesterday from the road commission, and they were gonna go out and either paint a line or put stakes like every 8 feet or something, so they can visualize where it's gonna go. And he said that'll really help. Because right now, like the boundary of it, just say the road's gonna go, it's gonna be from me to Normal Way, but the boundary lines where they can move their equipment to, there's like a stake where I'm sitting. Well, they think that the road's gonna go way over there. When actually, in reality, it's gonna go, 12 feet away, and so they're worried about that. So he said it'll help where they can go out there and either see something sprayed along. And anyways, that should help that project move along where we'll get that done this year. The only other thing they did, they approved buying gravel. They made their final approval over here on May Street. Remember, we vacated Main Street, or May Street over here by Fisher Contracting. So, other than that, I don't have anything else from them.
All right. Questions for Bill at all? No? All right. Kim?
Taxes, we settled with the county on March 3rd, so I have to have everything over that way. So our last set of payments that we can collect for real property is March 2nd. So anybody that still owes taxes, please be sure to get them in before that. And we can't accept postage. So if you're worried about, it can sometimes take a week to get in. So I would say either pay it online or bring it in and put it in the box if we're not open, so that those taxes are paid. Because once it goes to the county, more taxes and fees get put on it. And, that's just more adding up and more money that people have to pay. So, yeah.
Okay, but
That's what I got
there is a
there.
penalty if they don't pay by the 14th of February, so.
Right, yeah.
You're saying it's
Well,
gonna increase
the-
beyond,
Correct.
The
Yeah,
service fees that-
once we settle with the county then puts their fees and stuff on top of it. So, basically, I sent out, I came in on the 15th, and that after taxes were due, and I sent out letters to try to get them out to anybody that owed taxes. And that thus far that we haven't received anything from, and sent them out to everybody, so kind of remind them, hey, you need to get in and get this paid, or you need to go online and pay this. And so it's a pink letter, so that anybody sees a pink letter, please open it, and get that paid. But, so, I sent those out so that we would have plenty of time, hopefully, for them to get in and get those paid. So, March 3rd, once March 3rd hits, any payments that come in, we actually have to send them back, and you guys have to deal with the county if it's, real property. So, I don't want to do that to anybody, so.
all right,
That's it on me.
all right. Lisa?
I'm gonna go with their comment first with the census and taxes. The assessor sent out flyers for the census with the tax assessments for the residentials also.
Yep, same thing.
And then for the city meeting, February 24th, they did a departmental presentation by the Parks and Public Spaces Director, Chris Bundy. 2019 Community Improvement Awards. They received the proposed 2050 master plan as recommended by the Planning Commission and considered release for review and comment. They are having a master plan 2050 open house March 25th and April 23rd. You can get the times online.
Okay, very good, thank you. Norm?
Yeah, in regards to the road commission, some information was shared regarding the Isabella Road project, which now is being put off until 2021. Is that correct?
What's that?
The Isabella Road project is going to be put off.
No.
Or-
Broomfield, Lincoln.
Oh, Broomfield
Yeah.
Lincoln, okay. So, but we still have to recalibrate, I think, some of the 2% request based on timing. As you know, we have 3 requests that are in right now, that we're going to be submitting on March 31st for the 2% distributions. So one is we had the Broadway-Isabella intersection, and that'd be for the left turn signal and for the lanes, similar to what we're doing at the other intersections along there as well, right? And then we talked about the speed zone and safety lights for both Renaissance School and for Mary McGuire, and then we had some issues about that as well. And then we talked also about the interlocal pathway connector connecting Deerfield to Denison connection. So those are the 3 projects that we've talked about wanting to submit. But it seems that a couple things came out in that meeting that I think are going to affect some of what we're going to be applying for. So one is that we understood that Mary McGuire would be eligible for the safety lights and for the signage based on the fact that they are a walking school, whereas the Renaissance, because they're a charter school and considered a drop-off school, is not eligible for that. So that eliminates part of what we were talking about initially in a request. The other thing is that on the pathway going from Deerfield to Denison, we're still waiting for CMU to go along with their cost share on that. So as of now, I know Mark said he was working with them to get that information. So for us to go with the 2% with them, we want to make sure with the cost share with CMU. So that's still kind of pending. So there's a few things here that aren't kind of falling into place. And again, we have 1 month. As I said way back when, this stuff always ends up at the last thing, and then we're always stuck for what to apply for. So one of the suggestions is that, we could add another thing to that. And that would be, we're going to be doing the remodeling of Jameson Park building. And we have put that in our budget for that. But I think that might be a collaborative project that I think the tribe might be interested in going along with the 2% with us. And so what I would suggest is that we consider adding that to our bundling of what we want to submit for the 2%. And again, when you're talking about what the tribe looks for when they're funding projects, it's use and access. Well, a lot of tribal members do use Jameson Park, and it's right in that locale. So I think adding that would help maybe beef up a little bit what we're asking for, and I think it'd be a nice collaborative project with the tribe, and I believe it would definitely I think it would fly. So I wanted to bring it to the board's attention. Just that if we're all in agreement, then I'll kind of pursue that as well in my talks to the tribe. Is that something people are interested in?
What would the dollar amount be?
We don't know the dollar amount yet. You know what I mean? I guess what Mark has to do is go through, what the costs are, and then we always pick a certain percentage of what you ask for the 2%. It's a percentage of your total cost.
Do you feel like you need a motion to direct the administration to look into this further?
No, because I don't think we need, I think we can just, how we've been doing it in the past is a sort of nod of heads, if we're in agreement that this is a worthwhile
I
project
support
to
this.
add,
Yes.
I think. Okay.
The one thing I do want to mention is we did submit that once before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that Chairman Kikoman had written a letter supporting that, but it was a different portion of
Right.
that remodel. It was a smaller, more involving the building than it
Correct.
was the overall park itself.
Correct. And this is the costs, this is including the whole master plan that we have done for the building as well as for the park itself. So it's much more elaborate. So I think that, again, there's some type of a kind of percentage of what you do. Here's the cost, this is our share, and then, from that, you ask for the 2%. So I think that'd be a good thing to add to our list, if everyone's in agreement. So, good? Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead with that. And there's the other ones that came out, I think the Meridian Road, but right now they don't want to do any more roads, so we have to wait with that. I still would like to see that, two other projects I'd like to see eventually that we get into is the Pathway Bridge that would connect from O'Connor into McDonald subdivision. There's a lot of tribal members in those locales, and there'd be a pathway that there's like a drainage ditch in there, so it'd be like a little pathway connecting those two subdivisions with a little bridge, and I think there'd be support for that. Might be too late right now to try to go along with that at this point because of engineering and feasibility and all that kind of stuff and costs. And the other one would certainly be the sidewalk or pathway going on Harris and Crawford on the east side, going from River down to Pickard would be another good project. Now, that right now is set to be in phase 4 of the pathways. But if we could decide either a pathway or a sidewalk, and again, we have access all the way now because Coin has given us access to it. And then there's a chunk in there that would be the city. So it'd be a nice collaborative project with Union Township, the city, and the tribe. But I think those are the ones those two I'd like to look into for our fall. So those are just some things, just planting some seeds here, okay?
Is the pathway over on the connector between Denison and Deerfield, is it down to just us and the university, the city's out of the picture
No,
now?
I think, I believe the city's still in, but we're waiting for the university for their share of it.
Okay,
I believe, I'm not 100% on that, but I believe the city's still in on it, we're in it, but we're waiting for CMU before we go ahead and ask for the 2%. So we need to get
I think they're doing the routing and the routing of the pathway correct and the easement or whatever, right?
Correct.
And the construction management.
Right, and that's what we still have to get the approval on. So Mark said he was gonna be checking that out.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, Norm, you work with, now it's Frank Coulter,
Yeah.
not Alex Rodriguez anymore, you said?
Eric
Or
Rodriguez, yes.
Rodriguez,
So
yeah.
Eric was all along, he's always been the acting public relations director. And the reason for that is because Frank was the director, public director prior to Eric taking that over when Frank went on to the tribal council.
Oh.
So he was running for the tribal council, and he did not make it this last election. So that meant Eric then forfeiting that position, and Frank now is back into the actual the directorship. Eric is a manager, I believe, his new title is manager, and I'm not quite sure how that fits into the department. But so Frank's now will be my contact person. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
All right. All right, that ends item 9 and moves to item 10, consent agenda. Need a motion on that?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion support, discussion?
Warrants were in order.
All right.
Big surprise.
All right. So all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approved. And we move on to item 11, new business. First item is A. This is consider the amendments to the policy governance manual, township and township manager job description. Sherry, you want to lead us in?
Sure, thanks. A little bit of the background on this. In November of 2019, the board was examining the impacts on the administration of township operations. If the township moved to a superintendent form of administration from the current township manager form of administration, it was noted at that time that while the township manager's authority over the employees of the township is wide-ranging and is described in various documents to include hiring, supervising, overseeing, directing, assigning, reassigning, training, evaluating, and disciplining, it became apparent that absent from these descriptions was the authority to terminate or discharge employees of the township. As such, this authority currently rests with the Board of Trustees. At the last meeting on February 12th, the board directed the manager to review the governance policy manual and the township manager job description and recommend language that would vest the authority to terminate or discharge an employee of the township with the township manager. These changes were needed to be consistent with the board's preferred governing style of placing emphasis on an outward vision rather than internal preoccupation and strategic leadership more than administrative detail. There's an attachment in the board packet in response to that directive. And management recommends adding section 4.2.2.1 to the governance policy manual and additional language to the township manager job description as shown in the attached. And I'll read 4.2.2.1. Accordingly, it is the township manager that provides overall direction and is responsible for the selection, supervision, training, evaluation, discipline, and termination of all township employees either directly or through department heads. And that's the addition under 4.2.2 of the policy governance document.
Thanks, Sherry. I'd make a motion to amend Policy Governance Manual, Section 4, and the Township Manager's job description to vest authority for removal of township staff with the position of the Township Manager.
Support.
Discussion.
In review of this,
I need to say just something. I think I need to recuse myself from the discussion and voting on this subject because of my relationship with one of the township staff.
Because you have the potential to gain or lose financial on this, right? That's the idea.
I mean, I personally, feel that if the board thinks you need to recuse yourself, that's fine. I think you're okay, but I at least would, like some input because I mean she's got great input as well on this. Keeping in mind, I look to the other board members too, but that's just my thought on it.
I think the important thing whenever we discuss recusals is the perception, right?
Right.
It's not always
Right.
reality, it's perception.
Right.
And so I think the question to ask you, from my perspective, is, can you elaborate on that perception? You have concerns?
I mean, well, if I give the authority to the township manager to fire the staff, he could fire, therefore making it less money for me, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and if you
But
voted one way or
I voted
another.
no, then, it'd be
Okay.
in favor of me,
Right.
too.
I can understand that now.
Could she be involved in the discussion, but not
I'd
the vote?
rather
you can't-
not.
If you
Can't
recuse
deliberate.
yourself, you have to be out of the discussion
Right.
as well as the vote, is the way it reads in policy governance. It says both, but I feel like you. My sense is that you can deliberate on this issue without prejudice or bias, then stay. It's your
It's
your
how
own
it's
personal
perceived
one.
from
Sure,
the
and
public
and maybe
is-
then
Right,
that's
and
the reason for the
and,
recusal.
yeah.
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 So with this taking place, have you decided you are recusing yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
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 From my position,
We accept
I-
that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually,
Sorry.
just if we're doing it formally, if someone recuses themselves,
You have to
th-
vote.
they're actually supposed to just remove herself from
From-
the yes.
from-
as-
yep.
yeah. as well as not be able to discuss. Or
Oh, I guess
that's
the
that's
staff.
how it
We didn't do it
is.
last
I
time.
was gonna
I
say, yeah, I
know
think we
did-
usually
and-
just have them sit back,
Bill,
but
we-
yeah.
Bill, we didn't do it last time, and
You
I
want me to
realized
sit? I can sit.
later that we had done it wrong, you know. I had recused myself once in the
Yeah.
ZBA, and I
Okay.
actually removed myself from the meeting while they were deliberating on it, so that's a formality, but anyway.
Sorry, Tim, I interrupted you.
So
No,
he-
that's fine.
He
So-
had support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna start out some discussion. I don't think there's really any change taking place. I think there's just some clarification that we're going to make sure is in black and white. As a board, you know, our linkage to the staff was through our township manager. We certainly aren't in a position to manage individual staff members, so to be in a position to, we're not the hiring body of staff. We're not the folks who do the evaluations on the staff. We're not the disciplinaries of the staff. That has all been spelled out to be with the township manager. It just stopped with the word discipline. So discipline would also include, you know, termination or discharge potential. So I think it's already been there very clearly, but we're just making a move as we consistently do and review in our policies once a month on various policies to tighten up and take ambiguity out of certain policies. So I think this is prudent and falls in line and just spells out without question that our township manager also has the authority through the discipline to define that a little further by saying termination and discharge.
We've got two different levels of employee as far as the collective bargaining unit employees who have a appeal process. But we have two members of the staff that are non-bargaining unit. So the question I have is, with this, do they lose their appeal process on this? It's not really stated. So how do they go about appealing their termination? And then, so is that opening up the township for lawsuits as far as wrongful termination? Would be my first.
I mean, maybe this is just my understanding, but I feel like with policy governance, they always have that chance to appeal to the board. And that, if they feel that they've been wronged or something like that, I mean, my understanding anyway, you can correct me, but, is if, let's say someone was terminated or disciplined or something, they can still bring that to the board and that saying, hey, I feel this is wrong, and we can then reverse it
But
if,
they're no longer an employee of the township at that point because they've been terminated. I guess, you know, before we do this, I think we should have some type of legal clarification as to, because it's a big move, because, you know, I mean, this is somebody saying you're done. You know, what level of employee, if it's an hourly employee that is, you know, working on a water line or sewer or something like that, that's completely different than somebody that's a finance director or zoning and planning administrator or an assessor or whoever. It concerns me that seems to be, it's really when somebody's been terminated, that's pretty final. And I almost kind of wonder personally whether this was an intentional omission simply as a check and balance.
Ben, who would you offer, other than the township manager, to be that person who would make the decision?
Well, I think that the process to me, I mean, like I said, I think that the wording on this is all. And I can see a difference, and some of it's through department heads. And so with the collective bargaining unit, it's, you know, this, and this. We've disciplined the person multiple times, warned them. So, you know, we suggest that this person be terminated. That's pretty easy because there's been a process involved. But when you're talking non-collective bargaining unit people, it's always been kind of a, I think, kind of a gray area as to what their exact appeal process is. You know, I mean, I think that it's difficult for these people with the process that's in place for them to appeal anything, personally.
That's very common because most employees would be at-will employees. That's the reason we have the evaluations in place and training, coaching, encouragement if there's problems. Then in that realm, you virtually go to the court system, would be my understanding.
And that's what I was going to say was, their recourse is the legal system. We have protections for workers' rights. As an employer, if you wrongfully fire someone without cause, the court's the natural case for them to approach and say, hey, no, I didn't do anything. It was just my supervisor didn't like me for whatever reason. You know, unless it's specifically written into their contract that they're, you know, at will for a certain time or what have you. But I did want to point out, too, the way I read this before, piggybacking an earlier comment, discipline was in here. And I interpreted discipline as termination rights at that time. In fact, it doesn't say hiring in here, it says selection. But to me, that means hiring. And so I just read this as just a clarification of wording versus anything else. I already felt, despite the write-up, I felt our manager had that authority.
Go ahead.
Oh,
What I did today, because I was going back and forth on this, I didn't know what to think, okay? So I looked
Rock,
up,
paper, scissors.
I looked up the 20 there's 20 charter townships in the state of Michigan, if I'm correct. I got on the phone today, I called 6 of them. Of the 6 that I called, I was able to talk to people in HR, I talked to township clerks, I talked to one township manager. Of the 6 townships, 5 of them are like us, where we have an elected board, and then they have a township manager. One township, it was Genesee Township, I think, they have their supervisor, you guys will like this, their supervisor, their clerk, and their treasurer are all full-time employees, and they make big money. But anyways, I asked this specific question, who hires and who fires? They all said that the township manager has authority to fire, and they said that if an employee feels that they are being treated unfairly, that they can appeal to the board, and the board can decide whether they want to hear that appeal or not.
Yes.
So, after doing all that, I mean, I'm for this, but I understand where Ben's coming from, or an employee would be coming from. Maybe we should have something in there like that, where they have the option, the board has the option whether to hear the appeal or not.
Well, you could also, I think it's important that you're taking this particular part of the policy governance along with the next one that we're also going to be evaluating, the 2.2 treatment of staff, because that ties in. First of all, I agree with what both you guys have been saying regarding the it's been wording, but I believe that the authority was already there for discharge or termination of employment for different various acts. But there's also, I see that there's a oversight by the board if there'd be a wrongful action on the part of the manager, which would allow the employee to come before the board, and we could always reverse a decision if we felt it was a wrongful act. So if you look at 2.2, which we're going to do next, it says in there that the manager provide for effective handling of, explains to the employee that to provide for effective handling of grievances, protect against any wrongful conditions, that they can't discriminate against any staff member for a non-disruptive expression of dissent, prevent the staff from, they cannot prevent the staff from grieving to the board. And so those protections are already in our policy governance. You know, something, you just can't read one section, you gotta look at the whole
Right.
ordinance. So when you look at the two sections, it covers, I think, the concerns that Ben has, along with what we're saying in
does,
terms of
yes.
authority. And you're supporting what I would think most townships do, is that the manager's the one who has a day-to-day operation with the employees. We don't even know what goes on.
Right.
So, and we do get reports regularly, and we do the yearly evaluation, but we're doing policy governance review every single month. We're doing something. So there's always oversight here.
Yeah.
So I think we're just cleaning up. I think it's not we're changing anything. I think we're just putting it in more formality, terminology, then, so it's understood.
I just want to say thanks for articulating that, because actually today I kind of wrestled with this, because I had the same concerns, Ben, that, I mean, oversight's important from our perspective. And if we have a rogue manager that decides they go after somebody because they don't like them, or what, you know, something what I would not
Right.
consider proper, we need to be able to deal with that. And we would deal with that by potentially disciplining the manager, firing the manager. And if it was in the case of a termination that we felt was unethical or unlawful, I agree, we could step in at any point. I mean, we are the board. Policy governance is a policy, it's not statute. We have the right to violate our policy if we so choose to together and stand up and reverse something, right?
Yes.
Because we do have to be careful with that, Ben.
Yes.
We need that oversight.
And so all those protections are in there, in this. And we're not abdicating any of our authority or responsibility by what we're doing here. We're simply making, as is cleaning it up, the wordage is what we're basically doing.
Yeah.
But you gotta look at, like I said, you gotta look at this thing in a more comprehensive
No, you
manner.
look at the
You
mix.
know. So I would support it as well.
And I'd still like to see some type of a protection that allows, I mean, if somebody's terminated, then what we're saying is the board may choose to listen to their appeal. I mean, I still look at it, if you got somebody that comes in that decides, I don't like the cut of their jib, so I'm gonna, get rid of them. They're out the door. It's always hard to change something that's already happened. I still like the idea of, in some cases, whether there's some wording, particularly if they're an upward level employee, that there should be some more of a ability for that person to come before the board on that recommendation from the management that they be terminated. I think there should be something before that, because once they're terminated, like I said, I think it's really hard to change that decision.
It also says that the manager, 2.2.5, they always say it in negatives, so that the manager will not fail to acquaint the staff with the township manager's interpretation of their protections under the policy. So again, one of the protections is that if they feel that they've been wrongfully dealt with, they have the option to come before the board and to appeal the case. So we have the option both to either discipline the manager, we could dismiss the manager, terminate employment, and we could also reinstate an employee if we felt that a wrongful behavior was done. So to me, I feel the protections are there. I mean, I think if you interpret all this, I don't think we have to do more legalizing. I think it's pretty well speaks for itself.
Nothing's perfect, and I have two fears, and I definitely hear what Supervisor Gunning's saying. I've always had the concern that staff need to know that as a last recourse, because we don't have an HR department, right? Other than the manager. And they need an impartial arbitrator to go to. I mean, that's a valid concern. And we're not big enough to have an HR department yet. And so they don't have a place to go. And I think the last resort is this board. Having said that, I'll argue the reverse of that, in the sense that the other fear I have is the staff's environment being politicized, because this is a political body. And that's not healthy either. And we have to work together to ensure that we're not leaving our staff high and dry when they need a board to go to. And we have to do our best to not politicize their environment.
Exactly.
And I don't know that we have language that would always address all those cases, because they're valid concerns, I think.
Well, should we call to vote on this and see where we're at, or more discussion? It's up to you guys. Do we have to do this by roll call, or? Okay. Okay. Thanks.
All right, so you're called a question then?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Who's going to be the clerk in this case?
You should be.
All right. Treasurer Rice.
Are we gonna
Do roll.
restate, or we?
No, we don't have to.
Okay.
This is, do we have to do?
No, it's policy governance.
Oh, we have a
Let's
choice.
do a roll call.
If
Okay.
you're not
No.
clear on
Yeah.
the motion, that could be
That's,
reiterated.
and that's, I was just saying, do we have to reiterate the motion, or is it just, hey, yes, we're voting to adopt this, so?
Okay.
So the
Go.
motion was to adopt the policy governance manual, section 4, in the township manager job description, to vest authority for removal of township staff with the position of the township manager.
Okay,
And I support that as you had,
yep,
as I did before.
and yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Trustee Howe?
So, yes, yes.
Trustee Milky?
Yes, and I'm willing to talk further with you regarding options for staff.
Trustee Lannon?
Yes.
Trustee Worley?
Yes.
And I'm going to be the one dissenting, because I want to get that all cleared up before I would approve. So I'm going to say no.
Would you explain clear it up, meaning the issue we were just talking about?
I would like, yeah, I'd
Okay.
like to see just a clarification of how the staff has, what appeal process is in place, what is the process that they go through, which I think should be something that we should discuss.
I agree.
I always just kind of felt that was kind of a gray area in our documents.
So, with that, Supervisor, may I jump in briefly?
Yes, sir.
With that, we could ask our administration to look at presenting to us those options, so we understand them clearly. I mean, we can move forward on something at this point if you'd like. 'Cause
Yeah.
I would be supportive of that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, maybe
Yep.
the interpretation of the administration is it's there, and they can clarify that for us. Or we can go, oh, here's what's missing language that could make it stronger.
Perfect.
Yeah.
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 That would be
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, yeah. 'Cause I mean, without an HR department, it's always kind of a,
Right.
it's always been weird. Yeah.
So would you be willing to? It doesn't have to be done this week, maybe next week when Mark's back.
Yeah, just could you be, give me a little more detail so I know
I guess-
what note to make on that?
Yeah.
Just give me a little more detail on what you're
Boy,
thinking.
how would you word it?
I can try to articulate it and somebody else can jump in.
I think
'cause
why
I think
don't-
the sense is here, but it'd be nice to be, if the administration could clearly identify the pathways that staff has for remedy in contentious situations where they feel like they're not being treated fairly by, at this point, the manager who's their boss and also the HR person.
These two are both trying to write
Right.
this down.
You know, the thing is, the easy way to do this is that within their personnel manual, that there be an area for grievance, for wrongful actions, something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's something like that. There must be some type of policy along that way.
So you're not talking about putting something in the policy governance?
No, at this point, just
No.
getting clarification so we would know what needs to be corrected, if it needs to be corrected.
Yeah. And I think it needs to be, I think the collective bargaining unit has a clear path and an understanding. It's the- it's the-
Non-contractual employees.
Yeah, it's the collective bargaining unit that
Yes.
you're having to file a grievance with the person that you have a grievance with,
Right, exactly.
which is kind of a crazy way to do it.
If he has any other
Yeah.
questions, he can watch the video.
Yeah.
And a time frame on this, because I do know that Mark is planning to work on revising, and creating and coming up with a real good personnel manual. But
Okay.
that's gonna take some time, and so I'm trying,
If there just be something on the grievance procedure,
Yeah,
I think just
yeah.
something that just shows how an employee would go
Okay.
about a grievance procedure should they feel that they were wrongfully dealt with.
It doesn't have to be the next meeting from my
Yeah,
perspective,
no.
but I don't want it delayed
No.
indefinitely.
okay.
Obviously,
got it.
it depends on priorities a little bit,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Okay.
but I do agree with Supervisor Gunning's concerns that,
So do I.
Yeah. And I had the same concerns, but when I tied it in with 2.2,
yeah,
that for me then had that oversight,
added-
and that made it more
yeah.
comfortable for me in this.
When I ask those specific questions,
All right, let's go
To those-
2.2.
people I talked to today,
Uh-huh.
I'm back. No more discussion.
the one lady at Genesee Township didn't have
What's
much
that?
to do today because she kept wanting
2.2.
to talk.
2.2.
2.2.
Policy governance, 2.2, treatment of staff.
Which we've already pretty much discussed.
I just wanted to say a little bit about that one. Policy 2.2 states at its highest level that with respect to the treatment of paid and volunteer staff, township management may not cause or allow conditions which are unfair, undignified, disorganized, and unclear or violate collective bargaining agreements. There are several sub-policies that I won't read here, but are in the memo. This policy is interpreted by the manager to indicate that township management shall operate with written personnel rules, provide for effective handling of grievances, protect staff against wrongful conditions, protects against nepotism and grossly preferential treatment for personal reasons, and allows for diverse opinions on issues. Further, an appropriate level of cross-training will exist so employees can provide basic information and services to consumers. And we have data to support the administration is in compliance. And I have a list here. The township manager facilitated an appeal of a disciplinary decision to the board from the affected employee last year. Collective bargaining agreements are adhered to, and when there are questions of interpretation, the grievance process is followed. One grievance was filed late in 2018 that was resolved during the 2019 fiscal year, in part via the grievance process and in part as part of the collective bargaining process. No grievances were filed in 2019. We also had new collective bargaining agreements to replace those that expired at the end of 2019, and they were ratified prior to the expiration date after negotiations with the bargaining units. Training opportunities were provided to all staff, which included BSNA software training throughout the year, position-relevant training for the finance director, rental inspector, assessor, water sewer staff, building department staff, and others. The township spent almost $24,000 last year on this training for the different departments overall, compared to $9,000 the previous year in 2018. And the manager holds biweekly staff meetings where expectations are clearly communicated. One-on-one meetings are held with the township manager for several staff members on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which creates a venue for frank discussion and the opportunity to voice opinion on issues. And the manager also notes that the personnel and administrative policy document needs updating, and this is a goal for 2020 to create a replacement policy.
Yes, sir.
So, I wasn't here for this, but the first item in the data, the township manager facilitated an appeal of a disciplinary decision to the board from the affected employee. I guess, let me ask the board real quick, was that a union or non-union?
Non-union.
Non-union?
None.
Let me ask the board real quick, just, I'm kind of curious, was that a healthy process? Did that facilitate well? I mean, this addresses a little bit the concern
Yeah,
we were just
exactly.
talking about, at least in behavior of something that happened in the past. I don't know.
I can't speak on that.
What's that?
Okay,
I can't speak
We'll
on
talk
that.
another time.
I can't answer your question. I
okay.
can answer it.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's speaking a little bit to the path we were just asking about. Whether or not it's coded in our policy governance so that it has to be followed or not, I can't answer, but,
I mean, I don't believe it is really, there was just one step taken. It wasn't really a guideline that I know of, but I think maybe it needs to be drawn out a little.
yes, okay.
better.
Anyways, I just,
And I think
Interesting
what-
note at the top
I
of
think
that.
what we just asked for from Sherry
Yes.
Right.
regarding, you know, a more elaborate, you know, procedure should be helpful.
yeah, so there's expectations both from staff, the manager, and the board on how things are handled, so.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
yep.
I mean, we're trying to protect everyone in this process, and I think that's a prudent thing to do, to say the least.
So Sherry, kind of maybe to answer your question, I would envision this ultimately being laid out in policy governance. You know, that is our policy manual, and that is why we review these, to figure out what's missing in here, what needs to be added to make it clear. So as we have these discussions and review these, which happen to fall in perfect sync with the item before, is our development and making these more robust to be very clear.
It does seem like it could fit into 2.2 somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes,
Agreed.
agreed.
agreed, yes. Okay.
Go to the next one.
All right. Policy governance 3.2, board job description.
Okay, the policy states, specific job outputs of the board as an informed agent of the ownership are those that ensure appropriate organizational performance. Accordingly, and I'm paraphrasing here, the board has responsibility to create the link between the citizens and the operational organization. Number 2, create written governing policies that address ends, limitations of management. Number 3, create policies addressing the board's own work. Number 4, create policies for how the board and administration are linked. And number 5, has responsibility to work towards successful management team for performance. Following the policy is an evaluation section that can be used for the review discussion of policy number 3.2.
I feel we're in compliance.
I put yes.
So I think this again talks to us, that falls in line very
Yes.
appropriately with what we're talking about.
Right.
We are the linkage of the citizens. We listen to the citizens. We try to identify what cost for what owners that we will budget things for and create an environment. And we take that information and set our ends and we provide that to the township manager. It is his task to make progress towards the board's vision. That keeps us at a high level and taking care of the future needs of the township, why we have hired a professional manager to handle the operations as that person really sees fit to accomplish the vision of the board in, of course, an ethical and appropriate manner. So, oftentimes I think we try to cross that line and take on responsibilities of managers and department heads and others, where we need to understand a little more defined, I guess, that our connection with the staff is the manager. We need to do our job oftentimes better than we do by relaying what the citizens and how we understand their needs and talk amongst us to accomplish what the owners, the consumers of our township are relaying to us, and try to, digest it and see what makes sense for the dollars that the township collects to make that happen. And if we stayed in that arena a little more tightly, we would probably accomplish greater things as a board.
I think, again, if you bring them all together, because we go back to the original with the giving the authority for removal of township staff to the township manager. If you look at the justification, and it fits into what we talk about in our policy governance, that we will govern with an emphasis on an outward vision rather than internal preoccupation, as you're describing, that we have the, we provide the ends, the means are taken care of through the manager, that our vision, emphasis on outward rather than internal, that its strategic leadership is more than administrative detail, and creating a clear distinction between the board and chief executive roles. So that's the first part of it. And when we're talking about oversight, we also can talk about executive limitations. And so in this particular policy, governance of 3.2, in executive limitations, it talks about the, constraints on executive authority that establish the prudence and ethical boundaries within which all executive activity and decisions must take place. So again, there's that continued oversight that follows from, the first action to 2.2 and now over to the 3.2. So there's a consistency in what's being described all the way through. So it's more important for us to be having what the linkage is to the community rather than trying to govern the internal preoccupation here. That's a distraction from what we're doing for the citizens, which our role is. So.
I actually think,
Yes,
thank you. I actually think job description is pretty tough. The linkage is something you can always work with to the ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That is continual. I can never do that well enough. But, the reality is that governing's messy, right? And I think it's worth pointing out that while I don't disagree with the words you said, the reality is there's always this boundary in there between the staff, the manager, the township, that are executing the ends, right, and the board. And that boundary moves. And it is because of push from staff to want to take more ownership, or from township trustees wanting to take more ownership. You see that everywhere. The city has the same issue, right? Mm-hmm. There's a continual push against that boundary from both sides. And, part of our due diligence as a board is to make sure that we protect that boundary for everyone, right? It's not We have to make sure that we're not getting in the staff's way, but that we are doing the oversight. And that's a difficult balance. And that's why I think we have it's a tough job.
Well put.
Yeah, all said.
Any further discussion? All right. Oh, let's see. Get my numbers right. This is item 13.
Extended public comment.
Oh, yep, almost forgot about that. Item 12, extended public comment. This is going to be restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. So anything you guys want to get up and talk about. Yeah, get out of the way, huh?
Good evening. My name is Pat Heitman. I'm a member of and a resident of Mount Pleasant, City of Mount Pleasant. I like driving on Isabella Road. I was disappointed to hear what you were talking about Isabella Road. In the last 2 weeks, I have a friend that lives down Isabella Road, and I need to take some driving for her, take her places. I go down Isabella Road, I get to Bluegrass, and I'm almost hit. It was 3 times in the last 2 weeks. I am terrified. Michael can tell you, he was at my house the night I almost got hit the second time. I pulled in my driveway, I came in the house, and I'm as white as a ghost. Third time, happened tonight, happened this afternoon. You're driving down Isabella Road, you're either in the right lane or the left, or the outside lane or the inside lane. I don't care if you're going north or south. Cars do not respect you coming down there. If you're going at night, there is not enough light there to see off of Bluegrass onto Isabella Road. It's from Bluegrass to Isabella Road. That's the problem. My question is, we heard probably a year and a half ago that there was going to be a light put there. I don't know if that's going to do it. My sister lives in Kansas. Roundabouts are the big thing there. They love their roundabouts. You're not taking their roundabouts away from them. I personally hate them, but she has to deal with them. I mean, there's like, she lives in the part of Kansas where there's like 10 roundabouts. But I would like to see something done. We already had a death there, and that happened 2 months ago. I want to see some. It's not just me. There's traffic on Isabella. I work off Isabella Road. There has to be something that's done to that road. You have Bellows, you have Bluegrass, you have other cuts that come off of that onto Isabella Road.
We're just waiting for those
It's
two
scary.
assessments.
Yeah.
We're waiting for 2 easements. And we've been
Move forward.
working on these easements for quite a while.
Well, we've already had a death,
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
and you almost had another one. I was coming south on Isabella Road. I had a car, 2 cars pulled in front of me. There's a house right there. There's a driveway there. Bailing was what I had to do. I'm scared of that
So there-
intersection.
There's a road commission meeting tomorrow night. I'll express those concerns again tomorrow night.
And I would suggest that they also have a public comment
Yeah, there as well.
on there, and that would
It's a
be.
night meeting, not a day meeting?
It's a 6 o'clock meeting tomorrow evening. Don't worry, their public comment's quicker than ours.
It's like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, I think you caught us on a bad night.
Well, I also gotta go home and grade paper, so
Oh.
I got 2 hours of grading paper yet.
Yeah,
But tomorrow night, about 6:10, they'll have public comment.
yeah, it wouldn't hurt, because, I mean, you're gonna see a lot of nodding heads
I gotta work
on,
tomorrow night.
Well,
yeah.
like I said, it's those 2 easements, and hopefully, after maybe they went out there yesterday, they were trying to get out there yesterday or today, and maybe paint a line where these people will see where it's at, and then, they said shovel's gonna be in the ground this year. There could be, it's a project
What
that
are you
could
going
be
to do?
completed this
Are
year.
you doing a roundabout, or are you putting up a
No.
light?
There's lights, traffic lights.
Every intersection.
Your mother-in-law
It's gonna
live
be
in
all the
Topeka,
way
Kansas?
down.
Does your
Yep.
friend live in Topeka, Kansas?
I'm sorry?
Topeka, Kansas,
Yes.
by the, oh my
Yes.
gosh, tell me, my mother-in-law lives there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get
Roundabout.
on 46th Street, you have all of
I know those
roundabouts.
ones. We need to ride together.
My sister lives just 2 miles down from that, so when we visit her, we have to deal with it.
They live in No-Toe now.
By the way, I'm new to this board, but before I got on this board, I know there was discussions about that corner and trying to move this forward, but just to be clear, it's the easement issue that's really been holding this up, which is
There's
not
already
some,
been a death there.
Yeah, yeah.
and it,
yeah.
hopefully,
That
it
person's
should have
never
never.
going to live their life. They were 19 when they died.
Understand
That
that
needs to
one.
be expressed to the people that are
And
holding
I
out
was,
easements.
I could have been that today. So I am here, I sat through your 2 hours of your meeting to make that and express that.
Thank you. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
that, and
I
if you can
do
make,
not want
if you
to
can make
see
that road
anybody
commission
else get
meeting at
hurt there.
6:10, that would be, even help your cause even more so.
6:10? I have to
It's-
work till 6. That'll be a cut, so I'll
Do
try
they
to
have
make it
two public
tomorrow.
comments, Bill, or they just have the
Okay,
one?
thank you.
They have
Thank you.
one public
you.
comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe out there.
Let me know when you're going to Kansas and we'll ride together.
June, we're going out in June.
And thanks for being a teacher.
Maybe I'll meet you there.
I'm Pat Mayfield. I'm returning here for public comment. I spearhead the repaving project in the McGurk subdivision. This was started, I think, in first part of June last year, and we just don't seem to be moving ahead. And part of this is because of the administration fee that's been tagged on to the cost of 15% of the project cost. And a lot of people are just not favorable to that. Not for the way that it was determined with the original rough cost and then a 20% override cost on top of that, which I understand is typical. But then an additional 15% on top of that. And it's very frustrating. And maybe it's part of my misunderstanding of how the process works. You know, how monies are used to help in getting the project done. I understand there's other subdivisions that haven't been charged that administrative fee. And I really think it would make a difference if we could at least reduce it by a certain percent. I would like to see it go away, but it's just been difficult. And I feel like, you know, we're trying to make the township better by being responsible for resurfacing our own roads, and then not really having any jurisdiction on people coming in and using our roads. Maybe jurisdiction is not the correct word. We have no say on who comes in, what big trucks come in that can potentially damage our roads. So maybe this wasn't the correct forum to address this in.
This is the right.
Actually, it is.
You're good.
Yep.
But I just don't seem to be getting any answers. And, you know, here, we're looking at the 1st of March here in a few days. I was advised that this final petition be back in April, so it could potentially be done this year before we even have more damage to our deteriorating roads through another winter. So any advice, any direction to go, where to go from here?
We can't answer that question in this format, but you basically took my final board comment, which if you want to hang around for,
Okay.
Thank you.
then you could get some
Well, we've
answers.
been here this long, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, anyone else would like to come forward for public comment? Seeing none, we close public comment. We move to our next item, manager's comments. Sherry.
I won't take too long, I just have 3 comments. We have job openings at the township. There's currently an accounting specialist position open, that's full-time. The deadline to apply for that is March 9th. And we also have a public services assistant position open, which is full-time, and the deadline for that is March 30th. And we're also advertising for part-time seasonal, and the deadline to apply for that is also March 30th.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Any questions for Sherry at this time? Seeing none, we move on to final board member comment. I'm going to start over on this end of the room with Norm.
Okay, I just have one. When we went to our road commission meeting as well, we heard that March 20th is when we have to give in our order in terms of what gravel roads we'd be interested in doing. And then just for the public, we upgrade 4 miles of gravel road each year. It's $18,000 per mile in terms of the gravel. The first 2 miles, we piggyback along with the cost share, along with the road commission. And then we have 2 miles that we do independently in terms of payment. I just wanted to say that I drove around looking at what the road commission, where they were recommending the roads. And so one is on Lincoln Road from Deerfield down to Millbrook. And it's a mile stretch there. Definitely is needed. Also on Meridian Road from Deerfield to Wing is a half a mile, also is indicated. I liked what they wanted to do at Craig Hill. That's long overdue.
Yeah,
and that
Craig
kind
Hill's
of gets us
pretty bad.
up in that area there, and they had a half a mile there. I just would recommend or suggest that everyone get out, and start looking around at some of these roads. The one of the miles I would be recommending would be Millbrook, going from Isabella to Somerton.
Yeah.
So at that point, if you take a look at what Tony provided us, we will then completed that entire quadrant in terms of gravel roads.
South side of our
The
township
whole,
will be-
Yeah.
that's the whole southeast side, and that would be quite considerable from what we've done there. And if we go along with what they're asking for on the southwest side, that too will be taken care of, with the exception, there's another like a little half-mile stretch that could be done too, going down on Meridian. And at that point, you can just see all that we've done in just the 3 years so far. Quite substantial. I mean, it was 12 miles, and actually more, because we also did some stuff on 2 miles of Deerfield with limestone. So anyway, I would definitely be recommending Isabella and Millbrook Road from Isabella to Somerton. And we still need to pick up another mile, so maybe we can kind of look around.
That
and see.
Craig Hill that you talked about, that goes right in front of Memorial Gardens.
Yes.
It's terrible right
It's
there. I don't know if
horrible.
any of you guys have ever been to
Yeah.
a road there to a funeral, but it's pretty
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. It's like going through a landmine.
Yeah, it is, really, it's bad. It is,
Hey, Bill, if you could, tomorrow's a road commission meeting.
yeah.
If you could ask, on the roads that we've done, I've been seeing these pictures on Facebook of Millbrook. We just did Millbrook like a year ago, I think.
Not this area of Millbrook. We did the
No,
other.
no, I mean,
Oh, yes, I got you.
Lincoln down that direction.
Yes.
And so what I'm questioning is are we having trouble, because I know the big problem sometimes is the farms, the plowing encroaching on the ditching, which doesn't allow the water to drain and causes it to pool in the
Right.
roads. And I had talked with the supervisor at Wise Township, I can't remember her name. And they have an ordinance that
Yeah.
basically
Farm.
addresses that, and that the repairs on that are billed to whoever the farmer is.
In their taxes.
Yeah. And so we hate to spend this money on the roads and then have just simply the encroachment of plows. And I love agriculture and all, but, we've got all this money, it's not fair to all the other residents if the ditches get, right. And so I'm not sure what percentage or if we have a problem with that.
There is no ditch on the north side of Millbrook Road from Lincoln to Crawford. It just seems like there's no ditch. But now they're talking about how they're you guys have been around the county where they're grader ditching.
Yeah.
I mean, they're taking the grader down and they're narrowing the roads up, and they're,
Putting big
the
crown.
grader's making a
Yeah.
ditch.
Yeah. Well, Tony had indicated too that as we're finishing up on doing this first go-round on the
That we
gravel
could go back
roads,
and
we
refresh
could
them.
actually do both, not only refreshing, but also doing some of the ditch work, which you're
Yeah.
talking about, so we keep the crown on the road and go from there. So,
But we should discourage some of the behavior that fills those ditches.
Right.
Ideally. I mean, I don't want to punish our farmers because
Yeah.
No.
they've been punished enough.
yeah,
But they know.
Yeah.
Understood. But we need to make it clear that, you know,
I hope
for the good of the community, the
Yeah.
cost of the roads
Yeah.
is worth a little bit of extra care when you buy the ditches.
And so what's, our cost this year is
18, we started, well, 18,000 per
but
mile.
we're
Per mile.
talking $36,000
Correct.
with our cost share.
Yeah, and
Right.
2
Well,
years ago, it was
51,000.
14,000.
Is it
When we first
51
started
with that?
Well,
14.
with 3 miles, it'd be 51,000.
But I mean, per mile, we're
At 18,000.
18,000, that's a lot of money,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so we're putting that investment in, the road commission's putting that investment in, and,
Right.
but I'm not sure if we have a problem, you know, maybe that's something that we maybe get a copy of their ordinance. I think there's one other township that has of something very similar. I wanna say it's Gilmore Township has a similar ordinance in place,
I thought
you
it
know.
was, yeah. And or Sherman, maybe.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure this will be on our next agenda.
I just wanted to bring it up,
Mhm.
as, you know, we're getting close to timing
Yeah.
again, so
Yeah.
it's, you know,
Yep,
just as a reminder.
all right. Thank you, Norm.
You're welcome.
Lisa?
Presidential primary, March 10th, 2020. Don't forget
What?
to go out and vote.
Which date is that again?
March 10th.
March 10th, okay.
Do you need help setting up too? You gotta get a hold of Norm.
I might.
Norm and I are chapping at the bit to help.
Kim?
I just can't reiterate enough, please get the taxes paid. Sorry, I got to. I mean, it's really close to March 2nd. And so, I highly suggest, if you haven't paid, come put it in our Dropbox, come in, see our secretaries right up here. Don't rely on the mail. Don't rely on the mail. I don't want to have to send your payment back and, people get mad because they're gonna get more fees. So, if it comes after March 2nd, so, yeah.
Bill?
All I got to say, if anybody wants to see the side of my chair, or the side of me that my chair's seeing, fish fries start Friday night, so you can see my backside. I'll be frying fish in the kitchen.
I wondered where you were going with that. Glad you went that direction.
Two things, and probably the most important based on this discussion, and I do not want to steal any of your thunder, but I had it written down as well. So I'm going to give my take, and hopefully I'm not taking anything away from what you have to say, but what I've learned about the additional 15% fee that comes on these assessment districts, right? I was a little surprised, and I believe Trustee Lannon was on the board when you implemented this program to put aside funds so that township residents could declare their own district, upgrade their road, and then the township would help fund that through a minor, annualized percentage rate. But that was a win-win, because now the residents were able to, instead of having to pay all up front, those that couldn't do that could amortize it over time and have their road upgraded. And the township wins, because we're encouraging our neighborhoods to maintain their essentially private roads. And so I thought it was an awesome program put together by this township. But I never thought it was anything other than meant as something to encourage this behavior. And my fear is that a 15% fee is pretty substantial, and that discourages it. And, if we need to take action as policy, if others feel the way I do, that to diminish that fee, or at least make it possibly, at the very least, a fixed amount to cover some internal costs of overseeing that, because there's obviously internal costs with that. But it does seem excessive to me, and I guess I view this as a service to our community, right?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And we win too, because our roads are maintained. And so I want to give props to that, and if this board would like to look at being clear what this program is for, I'm open to going there. Second thing, if you saw the CDC's presentation on the coronavirus yesterday, pretty stark warnings. And so I'd like our administration to make sure that they have a plan in place. If this pandemic comes, it looks like it's coming. And CDC is saying you're going to figure out telecommuting options. Don't minimize public gatherings, et cetera, et cetera. The warning was stark, and my hope is that if we prepare, it doesn't happen. But I don't, from the sounds of it, it's just a matter of when is it coming. And so I think as a work employment staff, we ought to be prepared for that, have a plan. Secondly, and this is, can sound odd maybe, but I was going to ask this board to think about, is there stuff that we need to help our community prepare for? What can we do? And I don't know that I have ideas for this, because it was yesterday that I watched the CDC briefing, and I'm not prepared for what are the proper steps, but I think we ought to talk about it, because I don't know that we have a plan for that. Maybe we do.
We haven't fired our pandemic advisor, have we?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because that'd be pretty foolish to do that, wouldn't it?
Right. And
Yeah.
who's that again?
Is
That
it
we
what?
haven't, right?
Well, the county
So-
EOC
Depends if they're
should
loyal
take
or
care
not.
of that,
Yeah.
right? The county EOC should take care of all
EOC,
that, right?
emergency management would be a source, but
Yes.
also the health department
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
there for a resource
So maybe,
to reach out.
We should probably reach out to the health
Right.
department first, right?
so we know,
Yeah.
before anything happens.
Yeah,
So
I'd
we know
agree.
what the proper channels are. and-
Good points, Brian, both of
Yeah.
them.
To help disseminate information to
Right.
the citizens.
And from what I understand, you better buy the masks now.
Right. They're in short supply.
Because they're in
I'm
short supply, that, and I've got the Clorox already at hand.
And you don't want the ones that come from China.
You know, yeah. Okay, leave that one alone.
told. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, I would like to continue a little discussion about how we look at the roads we choose to fund. You know, they are county roads, so as Brian was saying, the township wins, the neighborhoods win, the county wins. These are township roads that citizens are taking upon themselves to burden the cost of keeping these roads in good shape. I'd be interested in seeing data, and it'd take probably some internal staff. But, you know, we gravel roads. And the number of houses on those gravel roads, it'd be interesting to understand, you know, taxable value for those properties in comparison to taxable values in the subdivisions. And find out, you know, in reality, do these subdivisions see more traffic than these dirt outlying roads, which I don't see those as through roads, but that's the term that's always used. We put money towards these through roads, where subdivisions often tend to be through roads as well. But I think it's important that we look at the subdivision issue that has gone on and the way that is financed and or not participated in by the township when we do roads. So if the board is interested in asking for some information and to be provided so we can maybe consider alternative or changes to how we often segregate subdivision folks and say virtually you're on your own. I don't think that's wise or fair.
I agree.
I agree.
Good.
You asked, but I do have one more. I think it's important that we have an open seat on the planning commission, and we have applications in place. So I was surprised a little bit that you didn't take any action on that, Ben. Applications are closed for that position. I mean, they were shut down, so I see inactivity.
I don't think they're ever closed.
Yes, there is a deadline to get your application in for that position. They're always open, but there was a date given. You need your application in to be considered for the seat. So it seems like we're at a stalemate of some sort, and it's a little concerning. And so I guess I'm interested in maybe hearing what your thoughts are.
My thought is I was gonna handle that in the next, we have a little bit of a luxury of the fact that we have, some spacing in between when their next meeting is and when our next meeting is. And so I wanted to make sure that, there was some open communication going on so that, everybody was on the same page before I bring anybody's name up. Too many residents have told me when I've asked them if they wanted to participate, were scared to do it because they didn't want to have their names brought up and then get turned down or embarrassed or humiliated with the words that were used by people when I asked them. So I don't want to see that happen to anybody. And so I want to make sure that there's some communication as to what my thoughts are and what your thoughts are before I do anything moving forward. I figured there was enough on this agenda at 9:30 that we didn't need to have that on top of everything else. So that'll be covered in the next, to answer your question, in the next meeting.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. I've got three things. Piggybacking on what Trustee Milky and Trustee Lannon were saying about special assessment districts, I believe we had two trustees that enjoyed that repaving of their roads based upon the system that was in place. Trustee Milky, Trustee Worley. We had three when Trustee Mikus was still with us. And so not that he just is on the board anymore. Nothing happened to him. So yeah, just to clarify that. So the plan that used to be was always prime rate plus 1%, amortized over 10 years,
Exactly.
with no special assessment fee or of any type. There was one other project where a neighborhood was trying to have their road done, which was St. Andrews. And there was a $20,000 fee that was thrown on that project, and that neighborhood reneged because of that charge. It was termed differently than what they're terming it now, but it was the same thing. It was on top of everything that was supposed to cover employee time, which I don't quite understand. The idea of having these roads done is important because, Trustee Rice, your road is got to be one of the worst roads there is,
Yes.
as far as a
I
paved
think
road.
mine's a little worse than that.
Yeah, yours
Yeah, I was
worse
gonna
because
say-
it has
I was gonna
no
say she-
paving.
And ours was one of the ones
But
in red.
see, this should be something
Yeah,
that
ours
that
is definitely red.
encourages, because
Right.
if I'm trying to sell a house and I'm living on Concourse, I tell you what, if I'm a buyer and I see that road, I'm gonna look somewhere else just because the road's so bad, right? And I think that we should be encouraging this. So what hasn't been discussed isn't just the administrative fee that was in place, the 15%, but also dropping the amortization down from 10 years to 5 years. See, now all of a sudden, a project like Miss Mayfield's here, where the additional assessment fee was $15,000 on a $64,000 project, but you're also taking the amortization and dropping it from 10 years to 5 years. Okay, that's a big difference, right? And so if I'm not flush and I can't afford to pay all out of pocket and I'm amortizing it on my property taxes, that's a lot of cash. And a lot of people can't do that, and so it discourages, correct? And so I would like to see a policy in place that goes through this process and says, this is what we do. And what Trustee Lannon brought up, and you've brought that up a few times before, is the through roads and the subdivision roads. And maybe we should have some kind of a project or process in place where encouraging, you know, Trustee or Clerk Cody's road, where it is basically a short little road, but it is just an absolute disaster trying to, you know, navigate. And so we should be encouraging this because it does nothing but improve and increase property value. If people are coming into the community, you want to buy a house, it's a more attractive option. So that's 1, 2, and 3. The other thing is that I highlight the word assessment when we look at special assessment districts. And when we say assessment, then it is a purveyance of the assessing department. And that should and has always been an assessing department function. Therefore, it's their purveyance, it's their time, it's not staff time. And I would like to see all of this addressed where we have it clear cut. And so when people want to come in the door and they want to do their project, there's no more of this. This has gone on a year, is when you first contacted me. And so we need to fully take care of this. And that's a true test of 3.2.1, which is the link of ownership and the operational organization, which is what we are, the link of ownership. You address us, and we have now addressed it, okay, to the next level. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would fully like to see and encourage the management to ensure that the assessing department has an assistant in place. I'm not doing anything beyond that, is that they need to assess the assessing department and the burden that's placed on that department and make sure that there's the proper tools in place so that we don't have an assessor here 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, kicking them out at 12:15 in the morning.
12:38.
12:38 in the morning. And so there's obviously an issue in that respect, and I would like to see that addressed. And thirdly, I'll make this quick, is I am so disappointed in CMU's administration deciding to take the CMU Western Michigan football game and move it to Ford Field.
That's unbelievable.
That is absolutely. I'm a fan of President Davies. You know, he's a good customer of mine. The athletic director and his family are good customers of mine. I like them. I think they're very forward-thinking, but I think that they really shortchanged our community by taking a game away. The trickle-down effect of hotels, restaurants, bars, party stores, gas stations, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars gone. Gone.
Probably the biggest weekend of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is.
Yes, and I think that, you know, I
Western's not
understand
doing
their
good.
rationale, and, you know, I mean, they have an enrollment issue, and they want to market themselves downstate, but I think this was really a short-sighted way to do it. I think that there was other methodologies, and I'm so disappointed. If I'm a CMU ticket holder, season ticket holder, I'm not re-upping my season tickets. I'm sorry. That to me shows that there was no respect for the locals. So, anyways, I think that needed to be addressed. I think we've gone full around the horn here, so at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Norm just did.
Okay. All right.
He couldn't get the words out.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I thought that's.